ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. Thank you very much for the brief introduction. And thank you, of course, to the University, Hamad Khalifa, very known university, very prestigious. And of course, I feel honored to be given this rare opportunity. Your introduction, very kind, because he gave all the ministerial positions I had been given the task, minus, I don't know why he chose to censor certain things. I spent more time in prison than in the government. Now, what relevance has that got to do with the university? That's the time where I studied most. I spent all my time from 8 in the morning, 12 midnight, either trying to memorize parts of the Quran and Hadith, is just reading books. That's the only reason why I'm invited here, because I had the opportunity to read as many books as possible. And I remember Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib, when reference to the wealth of knowledge, talking about the love for scholarship, love of knowledge, lazzatul ma'arifa. So this is, I think, an extremely meaningful experience and occasion to me, to be able to share some of the concerns. The topic is of the future of Muslim world. I'm too small a guy, and a small player, to be talking about the future of the Muslim world. But let me attempt to share with you some of our concerns. We are living in very post-normal times. Things are getting too complex, and the pace of change is just too fast, and the crisis is happening in various parts of the world simultaneously, which I think one scholar puts it as simultaneity. What's the problem? Your problem from Gaza to Ukraine, although some in the West is just Ukraine and Gaza is silent. That is also another complexity in the state of denial, the semblance of prejudice, the era of ignorance, as Edward Said, the great Christian scholar, puts it as the clash of ignorance. When he decided to launch a critique of Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilization, this is an 8-page article that Edward Said brilliantly debunked the thesis by Samuel Huntington by suggesting that it's not a clash of civilization. Civilizations ought not to clash, because the fact is that when you say civilization, you're talking about civilized people. So civilized people don't clash. What actually happened, according to Edward Said's thesis, is a clash of ignorance. So those people talking about human rights, democracy, and denying basic rights of people because they are colored or because they are different religion should come to the library and spend time to learn a bit more about humanity and life and knowledge. So it is clash of ignorance, you know. They assume they understand the Arabs or Islam or the other cultures, either be it Indian or Chinese. They assume, but they do not understand. Yeah? There is a stark difference between that and the Islamic call for lita'arafu, and that you decide or you differentiate people not because of their wealth or their color or their creed, but because of their piety, their humanity. Inna akramakum indallahi Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The level of taqwa. That exemplifies humanity. So when we talk about the future of the Muslim world, you can't ignore the relevance of your faith and values and the cherished principles of humanity. And what is happening today is precisely that. So I had this very, very meaningful meeting with Highness the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim, this morning. And I am struck by one remark that he made. He said, why is it that there's so much complexities, and as I said, there's post-normal times and crises, and some issues have been highlighted with some sympathy and empathy, be it Ukraine or Rwanda, or even the struggles by the ANC, African National Congress, led by Mandela, that later he was, exalted to high pedestal as a great champion for freedom, or even the Irish Republican Army, and not the people of Palestine, be it in the PLO those days, or Fatah, and now Hamas. It's Islamophobia. It's the prejudice because of the ignorance and hatred of what Islam stands for. I'm struck, and I told His Highness that probably, if you don't mind, I'm going to use this a bit in my lecture this evening. So as an honest politician, which is rare in this part of the world, I will have to acknowledge that what His Highness mentioned has a strong bearing what I have to say. So the whole idea of scholarship and learning and experience, and to know and respect, we should not hate the others. We are never brought up to hate the Christians or the Jews or the Hindus, because the Quranic injunction is lita'arafu. It's not tolerance. It's beyond tolerance. It's to be knowledgeable, to understand, to know one another, to show appreciation, and to recognize the differences out of our attempt to understand and know one another. So for us, if it is a combat or conflict between East and West, we never ascribe to what Rudyard Kipling suggests or talked about. East is East, West is West, and never the twain shall meet. That's peculiarly an imperialistic, colonial mindset, a condescending view towards the rest, because the West is superior. And the same position taken by Rudyard Kipling, who grew up in India, incidentally, and took that position of strong prejudice against Islam and the East, that later permeated the ideas of Huntington, the Clash of Civilization. Now, you are aware that Kipling represents that worldview which we have to resent. And we are not taught to sow the seeds of discord and hatred towards the others. That's why we are comfortable. Qatar, Malaysia, and these countries, we are comfortable. We are comfortable with the Americans, the Chinese, and our neighbors. And our neighbors, like Malaysia, to the north is Buddhist Thailand. To the south is Singapore. Further south is Indonesia, which is predominantly Muslims. To the east is the Philippines, predominantly Christian. Further east, the Chinese, the Buddhists, or the Confucianists, or past communists. It doesn't make a difference in as far as our respect, cooperation, be it trade, investments, or cultural understanding. In Malaysia, some decades ago, I organized a conference and popularized first the series on Asian Renaissance. I started by introducing the great Filipino hero, a Christian, Jose Rizal, and consider him as the precursor to Asian Renaissance. His ideas against Spanish imperialism, his strong thesis about independence and pride and integrity of his people. Then I went to Rabindranath Tagore, the great Bengali poet and thinker, whose magnum opus Gitanjali talks about his spiritual journey and the beauty of nature. Then Jamaluddin al-Afghani and his zeal and fight against imperialism and independence for Muslim countries. Then Muhammad Iqbal, the philosopher poet, in his brilliant thesis, The Reconstruction in Religious Thought in Islam. You see? And all these great figures, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, represent a view that we choose to learn and ascribe for. And I think that is the essential position, what we mean humanity. Was there a prejudice? No. I'm a Muslim. I'm practicing Muslim. And trying to become a good, as far as possible, a good practicing Muslim. But I've never been taught to prejudice, to ascribe or perpetrate hatred, or more so injustice. And that's why it's very painful. As I said to many of the leaders I've met, either it is in front of President Joe Biden or German Chancellor Olaf Scholz or my colleagues in the Arab and the Muslim world, that we must remain consistent. Otherwise, we cannot talk about the world community. We cannot represent this new conscience if we tend to be selective in our views and take strong, condescending view towards the others, or prejudice and hatred. That's why, as I said to many of my colleagues, including some European leaders, I say it's very painful. Malaysia, for example, is predominantly Muslim. Muslim means 60%. The rest we have Chinese, Buddhists, Christians, Hindus, enemies. And I'm given the mandate to be a prime minister. To me, I don't feel satisfied or comfortable if I hear a Chinese Christian or an Indian Hindu feeling that he's being discriminated or ill-treated. If I talk about combating and elevating the poor, the hardcore poor in my country, irrespective of whether he is a Muslim, Malay or Hindu, Indian or Chinese Buddhist, it is my duty to try and protect them. And I suggest that similarly, the same attitude should prevail. Why is it we are trying our best to do it, but we have seen many predominantly non-Muslims who are in the majority perpetrate so much hatred, injustice, and discrimination against minority Muslims? Why is it when you talk about humanity, you talk about democracy, you talk about human rights, and you allow the perpetration gross inhuman genocide against a segment of the population, whether it's in Rwanda or more so in Gaza? It's mind-boggling. It's just sheer madness. I use the term hypocrisy. It's true. Ukraine becomes the central thesis position, foreign policy position for European countries and for the United States of America. But there's so much tolerance, denial. You can see even in the mainstream media in the West. What genocide are you talking about? What injustice are you talking about? And then the mantra is 7th of October. Well, this is reflection. This is a challenge to me. I mean, you professors and students of this great university, this is a challenge that is not as simple as we assume or imagine. It's more complex. It will take a lot of conviction, a tenacity of purpose to continue this year and present our case, not against anyone, but to promote this humanity. Can you imagine, after centuries of battles, I mean, can you imagine a genocide can happen in 2024? I'm a Muslim. I've never endorsed or supported the genocide against or the Holocaust against the Jews. It's my conscience, it's my akhlaq, and my values that would reject that, what was perpetrated against the Jews. Now, how can then you imagine decades after that incident, you can still have the atrocities, and it's bleeding, and that would prompt so much anger, and there's no wise for humanity. How do you stop them? People are just enraged. I'm in Malaysia, so far away. People are just enraged, not able what to do. They just get angry because there's a failure of the entire system. International community, zero. The superpowers, zero. The mainstream media, zero effort or minimal effort. But the bottom line, the atrocities continue. Even in the, as you see the studies, the so-called scholastic studies on genocide, you see, the problems faced by the Palestinians or in Gaza is completely or largely ignored. Now, I'm not saying this as a sign of hopelessness. I'm no optimist. Otherwise, I would have survived this decade long in prison. I am optimist. I believe that finally reason will prevail, sanity will prevail. That's why you have universities. You still have good teachers, you still have students with such idealism, and you can see students all over the world, in Europe and the United States, expressing themselves with conviction, having to withstand the odds and tribulations, even harassment and intimidation, because that's love for scholarship is all about. That is lazzatul ma'arifah, that you love scholarship because of the principles, the ideals, and knowledge is therefore to be assimilated. Yes, for what? You know, the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and more so in this digital age and AI, you have, of course, information and knowledge and wisdom. You have ilm and finally hikmah. And this is summarized by the great English poet T.S. Eliot, between information and knowledge and wisdom. So it's challenging the students, be it an IT or AI or engineering or liberal arts, is to be able to decipher between what is information, which is in abundance, and knowledge, and finally wisdom, to decipher, to reflect, and decide for what is best. So, let me end quoting a great Palestinian poet, contemporary, Rifat al-Arir, who in 2018 graduated with a PhD from Universiti Putra, Malaysia. As a professor of English literature at the Islamic University of Gaza, Dr. Rifat taught Shakespeare. Now, I share Harold Bloom's contention that Shakespeare is the pillar, of Western canon. You know, Western canon, the central core is Shakespeare. I'm a Malay, I'm a Muslim, I'm an Asian, but I have great admiration for Shakespeare. And to me, it's not a contradiction. That was what knowledge is all about. That's what beauty is all about. I only hope that some people in the West will try and appreciate some of the Muslim scholars the way we do appreciate some Western scholars. But it does not necessarily happen that way. Now, back to Rifat al-Arir. In December last year, our dear Rifat was killed, together with his family, in the Israeli wave of terror in Gaza. So I believe it's fit that I close with Rifat's poem entitled, sadly, If I Must Die. If I must die, you must live to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad, who left in a blaze and bid no one farewell. Not even to his flesh, not even to himself. Seize the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a tale. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.